Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each and every one of you here, and super excited to have my guest with us today. We've got Lucinda Rome. She's the founding and managing director of Ganders Travel. Lucinda, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Good afternoon, Jason. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
This is going to be so much fun. Before we get started, Lucinda, where are you right now? Where in the world?
In Hampshire, in the UK. England, yeah.
All right, very cool. And as you know, and maybe my listeners know, I'm actually in Mexico at the moment. And so isn't it wonderful that technology allows us to do that?
It's amazing. It's like being in the same room having a cup of coffee, right?
I wish we were in the same room, but it's the next best thing. Actually, it's really been cold here. I had heard that Mexico City can get cold in the winter. I didn't really believe it until I recently started thinking I need to go buy another jacket, maybe another blanket for the bed. It has been a little chilly, but I'm not complaining. What's the weather like there?
Actually, today is the first day we feel like spring is around the corner. It's sunny and warm. First day I didn't wear a coat for the dog walk, so we're going in the right direction, and it's dry.
Very, very cool. Hey, before we jump in, let's give our listeners, I already said before we jump in, so this is a second before we jump in, but I want our listeners to get a chance to kind of understand what Ganders Travel is. We're not going to go too deep into it right now, but maybe give them like the 30 or 60-second elevator pitch, and then we'll dig into your story.
Okay. So we're a tailor-made tour operator, and we specialize in holidays to all of Eastern Southern Africa and the Indian Ocean. So those are the only areas we concentrate on, but we've got intimate knowledge of all of them. So it's quite tailored and bespoke itineraries, safaris, Indian Ocean breaks, Cape Town, Victoria Falls, things like that.
So you said tailored and bespoke. I think most of our listeners know what that means, but maybe in your own words, what does that mean to you? What is the reality of what you're doing?
In reality, it means it's a conversation with you, learning about what you might have done before, what you enjoy on holiday, what you don't enjoy. If there's something particular you want to see, time of year you want to go, experiences you want to actually incorporate, be it riding safaris, walking safaris, traditional game drives, snorkeling, Cape Town, whatever it is. So getting to know you as an individual, as a family, whoever the group is, and then using the knowledge and experience we have after too many years in the industry. I don't know who openly admit to yet. I suspect I will later in the conversation.
It'll come out.
They will come out. To make the recommendations for the client. And then we put an itinerary together. We can change that as much as we need to. And so it's entirely for you. No two trips are the same because no two people are the same. You might have an idea that you want to do something similar to your friends because they really enjoyed it. But it may be that hotel or that camp wasn't the right one for you because you really like being by water and they wanted to be on top of a hill. So it's as simple as that. We get to know the nitty gritty, I guess, and we're no more expensive. So there's the plus side as well.
Love it. And before we even get into the full story, I can already tell you've been doing this for a while because you mentioned one thing specifically that has come up in a few conversations when we talk about how do you work with clients. And you said we like to ask things like what you didn't like in the past. That is a game changer that some people don't think of. We have a tendency, people come to us and say, we want to do this. And we say, oh, okay, I can help you do that. And you might ask, what kind of things do you like to do? But it's that question, what has not gone well for you in the past, that really tells you what people, it kind of opens up a whole new conversation. So,
Well,
well,
it
we
does.
stayed. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because actually some people have never been to Africa before, and it's quite a unique part of the world. It's not necessarily comparable to Europe, for example. And if this is your first sort of big holiday, it's your honeymoon, it's important you get it right. And a barren safari is still expensive, but you don't know what a bad safari is because you haven't been before. But you know what you, as a couple, as a family, as an individual, do and don't like. You know that you need indoor plumbing, as I sometimes refer to it as, or if actually you want the really wild, raw adventure, or a mix of both. You know what you're like. So you know that this is what you enjoy on holiday and this is what you don't want.
Maybe you mentioned indoor plumbing, and that was the example I kind of had in my mind. I was going to ask you about, because that's one. But maybe a couple has been on a trip to the Rocky Mountain West in the United States, for example, and you're speaking with one of the two in the couple, and you're like, "What do you not like in the past? Tell me about a trip that you did not like." And they say, "Well, my husband drugged me on this trip and we were camping outside and I didn't have access to a shower for a week and I was miserable." Then that's a really good opportunity for you to have a conversation about the realities of Africa. And I'm not saying that everything in Africa is camping and no showers. It's not the case. I've been, I
It's
know.
actually more difficult to find that these days. You know, everything is just so amazing when you're in the national parks. You might be in a tent, but it's not a tent I'm putting up in the back garden.
It's not a tent like most of us remember growing up when our
No,
parents took us camping.
it's not. No, far from
Now,
it.
and on the other side, it is still a tent. So if maybe someone says, well, we went to this one place and we were in this hotel and the walls were paper thin and we felt like any noises we made, everybody was going to hear it. Well, that might be a good conversation to have as well, because the tents are still
They're
tents in
tents,
that
they're
regard.
canvas sides.
So very, very cool.
I think luckily in Africa, you've always got something, you know, a hippo or a buffalo or a wildebeest or
You can
something
always,
sort of
so
making,
you're saying you can
yeah,
always blame the noises.
yeah,
No,
exactly.
wow, did you
Did you
guys
hear the
hear the
buffalo
monkeys
last
last
night?
night? Those baboons were going nuts, weren't they?
Why not?
All right. I didn't think this conversation was going to go that direction, but
No, nor did
anyway,
I. Wow.
that's okay. All right. So I will ask you real quick, because you mentioned
Mm.
bespoke, customized. Really, there's a bunch of different words that we use in the industry. But the other side of the spectrum is some tour operators do group trips. So I just thought I would ask, is that something you have done? Is that something you're thinking about doing? You have any thoughts on doing any sort of group trips?
Yeah, we definitely do group trips, but we do very specific ones. I'm quite fussy when it comes to the group trips we do. And so we can either do a group trip entirely for you. So you can put a group together, so there are 20 of us, and I've done it, you know, we're a multi-generational family, we're taking everyone. And that slightly becomes a group trip because there are 20 of you, right? So you've got to move 20 people.
But
Or you
at least they're 20 people that kind of, well,
know each other.
maybe know each other. Maybe they
Yeah.
haven't traveled together, but yeah, okay.
So that's one side. Or you have the small, and we tend to do the small group departures and then very specific ones across Africa. So there are countries which I think in Africa work better for small group departures than others. And the reason for that is some small group departures in some countries, so I'm going to take Kenya, for example, amazing national parks, beautiful national parks, incredibly rich and also incredibly diverse. But a group departure which tries to take in Tsavo, Amboseli, Masai Mara, Nanyuki, up into Meru and Samburu in 10 days, you're going to spend 5 of those days on the road because the distances are just too big and they don't flow into each other. Whereas countries like Botswana and Tanzania, northern Tanzania, all the wildlife areas actually flow into each other. So if we go to Botswana, for example, you are in the Okavango Delta, but one area of the Okavango Delta is very different to the other area of the Okavango Delta. So when you move as a group from one camp to the other, you spend an all-day game drive with your guide. You're seeing, you're doing, you're experiencing. You're not just on a really bad road for 6 hours to get to the next national park. You're actually experiencing the country. And then you go from the Okavango Delta up into Chobe and the same thing, full-day drive, so that camp goes on ahead of you. Or in Tanzania, the Ngorongoro crater flows into the Serengeti. So and the Serengeti is vast. So you've got all these different areas you can go and explore on a small group departure. But every day you move, it's not just a logistics day, it's actually an experience day.
Help me understand because I'm curious and I suspect maybe someone else listening to this is as well. Because we're talking about the differences between kind of that customized bespoke trip, probably for a couple or a small family, compared to group trips. And I heard you say we were talking about some of these areas work better for group trips, but I'm wondering, so the first example you gave was Kenya, and you said, well, you might be on a bad road for 6 hours. Help me understand what the difference is, whether you've got a group of 12 to 20 or you've got a couple, because I'm just curious. You brought that up and I got a little lost.
Yeah, no, that's fair. If you're a couple, we'll tend to fly you.
Okay.
So you ignore that road altogether.
Okay.
Actually, those little light aircraft flights become part of the experience because you see the country from the air. So it gives you a totally different perspective. But you're not sitting 6 hours on a really bad road. You're a couple of hours in the air connecting national parks, and then you're experiencing again.
Is that purely a logistical thing because it's harder to move a group of 12 to 20? You don't have 5 small aircraft that you can put everybody in, or is it just cost?
Primarily cost, because you can get a 12-seater caravan, which would happily do those routes. But a lot of the group trips are designed for, to keep the people who put them together, try and keep the costs as low as possible. And so therefore they're not going to use a flight, they're going to use a vehicle.
The light bulb just went off in my head. Thank you for helping
Sorry.
me turn on the lights.
Sorry, I took a rather long way around to do it, but that's
no, I get it. I get it now because as someone that used to put together a lot of group trips and do custom trips, I felt like I should have figured that out quicker. But you're right. If I was putting together a group trip, I would look at places that were logistically just a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And maybe a little less expensive because a lot of people that go on group trips, that's part of why they go on group trips is because because I'm a single or it's a couple. And if we go with a group, maybe we save a little bit of money. Maybe we have to put up with some crazy other people in the group. I don't know. But
also you get to know your guide, right? It's a different experience. You get to know your guide. The guide gets to know you, gets to know what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy again, what you've seen. Crucially, if you go from one camp to another and you haven't got good camps and good guides who go, where do you come from, and have a chat with you before your first game drive, you might go out on your first game drive at the second camp and they stop and show you Impala and say, well, these are Impala and they are this, and they go from the basics again. Whereas when you've got a guide who either bothers to ask the question or is traveling with you throughout, knows that you've already gone through that and can just point out the different behaviors potentially or different aspects that you might have not seen already.
Right. And it sounds like the way you're describing the group trips is oftentimes, I mean, in my experience, I don't want to speak for you, but in my experience, there was some consistency of either a guide, a local guide, or a trip leader that maybe is even the one that put it together and understands it all and can kind of, do that briefing with the guides, when you arrive at the new lodge. Hey, this is what we've been doing. And they will know to bring that up, even if the guides don't, say, hey, where were you guys last? So just, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you going down that road with me. That bumpy road. It didn't last 6 hours, but it was pleasant. So it's okay. All right, Lucinda, let's figure out, kind of know where you are. Maybe there's more to learn, but before we do that, let's go back and figure out how you got from where you were to where you are now. Some people like to go all the way back to where and when they were born, and other people say, well, a few years ago I decided to start this business. So let's pick somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. I mean, I guess, yeah, it's without going back to when I was born, I think I did a charity climb on Mount Kilimanjaro. I was sort of head of a division of the charity, and I thought that, and we were going to run this as a fundraiser, and I thought if I was asking other people to do it, I should probably do it myself. I then read.
I'm gonna pause you. So we got to go a little further back. You can't start with Kilimanjaro.
That's where my Africa started. That's where.
I understand that, but I suspect you didn't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm interested in Africa." So I'm just curious. Where did you grow up? What was going on?
I grew up in the UK, in southwest England, a country rural upbringing on a horse most of the time, if it wasn't, with the animals. So really wonderful upbringing. But genuinely, I had never been to Africa until I did Kilimanjaro. So, and I'd taken a very
Had you traveled at all when you were growing up?
Yes, we obviously done family holidays and things like that. When I was at university and studying history of art, I did a year out of my degree course. So my degree course was 3 years, and I did at that stage, they called it the European exchange. I can't remember the exact title, but I got the opportunity to apply to go to a European university for 1 year of my course and extend it to a 4-year course. I think partly because of my surname, but I was lucky and I got invited to go to Rome University. So that was somebody studying history of art to go to Rome University. That was
Right.
just
Yeah.
fabulous because living and breathing it, you just everywhere you turn, there's something to look at or investigate or learn about. So yeah, I guess that was the sort of first toe in the water in terms of travel because I lived there for a year, didn't speak Italian to begin with. All my lectures were in Italian. So that was a steep learning curve. Back in the day before phones and automatic translate, I had a dictaphone and a dictionary that's, a sizable doorstop. And I used to just go home and translate each lecture. And eventually my Italian got good enough that that took me less and less time. So I needed something to fill my time, and I'm a student in the city, right? So I got myself a job, and my job was being a tour guide in Rome, primarily
Okay.
in the Vatican City.
See, and you were going to skip all over that and go straight to Kilimanjaro. Oh, come on.
Oh, Kilimanjaro is the fun bit, right? Mind
It's
you, this
fun.
was pretty good. This
We
was
will
pretty
we will
good. I
get
love it.
there. But I'm starting to see the connection now. Okay.
Mm.
You're doing tour guide in
Um,
Rome, interested in
Tour guide at Rome around the Vatican, did 6-7 hour walking tours of the Vatican museums and San Pietro, St. Peter's Basilica, which was fabulous. And then I also did Centro Storico, which is the historical centre of Rome, walking tours or tours of the Colosseum or the Forum, or took tours out to the Villa d'Este or to Tivoli. I mean, it's just it's just so rich. It's just fabulous. So I did that
I'm
until I
gonna
came back. Yep.
I'm gonna ask you some more questions about that in just a second, but I'm curious, when you were growing up in
Mm.
high school, do you remember where your love of art came from? I mean, was that always what you were going to do, or did you just scramble at the last minute when you were going to college and oh geez, I need to choose a degree, or what? How did that all come about?
A bit of both. I actually grew up wanting to be a vet.
Okay,
That
you
would be
mentioned
my,
animals, so yeah, okay,
yeah, that was my thing. I wanted to be a vet, but it's incredibly competitive, quite rightly. And my sciences just weren't strong enough. So I got, after my GCSEs in the UK, when you're 15, 16, and you do 9, 10, 11 of those, depending on school and you and everything else, they've slightly changed it now. You then you go right down to 3 or 4 subjects. And at that stage, after the 15, 16, when I was 15, 16, it didn't look like my sciences were strong enough to get into a good vet school. University course, I would probably become a veterinary nurse. And I didn't want to be the nurse. I wanted to be the vet. So
okay,
I basically went to a lot of different lessons to work out what my new A levels were going to be. And one of them I walked into was history of art. And so that was it. I was bitten. I've always loved photography, and maybe that was sort of coming through, but I was completely hooked. That was it so I did it from 16, and then it was an obvious sort of route to go and do it at university.
curious. I say that a lot. I am a curious person. I recognize I say that word a lot. Do you? When I think of the history of art, you've got two things going on. There's a huge history element involved, obviously, but then there's also kind of the visual element. You
Yep.
mentioned photography. We're getting ready to talk more about Africa, which is very visually stunning and maybe even overwhelming at times. So I'm curious, was it more the visual part of the art, or like would you stand, like when you were guiding and you're standing in front of a piece of art, was it a conversation about the art or what was going on with the artist during the time when it was created? What was more fascinating to you?
It's kind of both, because one of my other A levels was so my 2 other A levels were history and
Okay.
geography.
Okay.
So you kind of got all of it. I love the history, but actually what I found with the history and the history of art is that they kind of went like that,
Mm-hmm.
because my sort of favored period of art was sort of late Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque. probably my sort of preferred period. I did some
Is
modern,
that
some
because of what was going on during that period, or just visually you just like that the art that
I
came out of
think
that
both.
period?
I think the politics was extraordinary, the culture was extraordinary, the idea that you've got people burning books, but it's just criminal in, in my book. But you've also got so you've got that background of culture and complete social change. But this is also being represented in art, and art became a sort of a form of the power, and it was a visual power. And you could get the artist to paint yourself into the picture. But then actually the artist's lives as well, but not linear. You look at someone like Caravaggio. I mean, he lived quite a life, whereas which was very different to Michelangelo, who was the portrait put upon poor artist for me, but also brilliant. And so there was so much development and so much change and so much to get your teeth into, really. It's not linear. There's not one thing that you buy into. You can't just look at it. Yes, it's a pretty picture, but I think you have to emotionally respond to it to really connect with it. And that is the period. I appreciate the brilliance of later artists and their draftsmanship, like Picasso, but his art doesn't speak to me in the same way that the Renaissance and the Baroque, and particularly people like Bernini and his 3D sculptures did.
I love having conversations with people that have passion about something, and that's what I'm experiencing right now. I don't know a lot about the history of art, and just listening to you, I'm like drawn into it. And I'm imagining, so now I want to get back to when you were guiding, because I'm imagining you had a wide variety of people that would show
Uh-huh.
up on your tours, and you
Mm-hmm.
never knew what
Mm-hmm.
you were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And you clearly have a passion for history and art. And I'm just curious, tell us a little bit more about you mentioned Vatican and El Centro of the city. What kind of tours did you end up doing mostly? What was most of the focus on? Architecture, food, culture, art,
I
everything, I'm
think
sure, but
the architecture and the art and the history, because you can't look at one without the other. But I think I was primarily on the Vatican tours, which were 6 7 hour tours. So we used to go through the museums, and obviously you've got all the sculpture galleries, you've got all the Raphael rooms, of course you've got the Sistine Chapel, but you've also got the Pinacoteca, which is the painting gallery part of the Vatican museums. So we used to go through there first, and you got everything from Giotto and Raphael. So you could really see the development of art through, the way they'd arranged it. You could see from Gothic all the way how things changed and how three-dimensionality came in and how the S-curve came in and color and everything else. So we used to do that, and I used to love that. But then obviously going into St. Peter's Basilica is an incredible place, and you have to respect its history. You have to respect its religious building, but it's also got some amazing art because, of course, it's got, the Pieta and things like that by Michelangelo, but it's also got this, so its history and the papal history, which was not always linear either, it becomes part of the art. So you can't have one without the other, because the politics also played a big role. Because, if you had a member of the family like the Medici got your next stooge in as Pope, you became even more powerful. So the politics behind the throne almost were as interesting as the art and the architecture. So I did a lot of that. And then I did the ancient stuff as well. But I suppose I probably didn't do as much of the ancient as I did on the Renaissance era.
okay. Couple of questions. When you mentioned that you got to the point where you didn't have to spend so much time translating your lectures, and
Yep.
so you went out and got a job as a tour guide. I guess the question is, I can imagine some people saying, I want to be a tour guide because I love art and history and culture, and I get to go to museums all day and I get to see things. And then there's other people that are like, yeah, that's great, but I'm passionate about sharing it. I'm not doing this job just so I can go to these cool places. I'm doing this job because I really want to share my passion with other people. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you remember thinking what was your motivation to go be a
I
tour
think
guide
it's
as
much
opposed
more
to just
basic than
working
that,
in a museum?
Jason.
What's
I
that?
think it's much more basic than that, Jason. I was a
Yeah.
student who needed cash, and they wanted an English speaking tour guide, and I had
Love it.
knowledge and history, and
So
I spoke
honest.
English. I would love to say it was this higher calling, but I think it was much more immediate. I'm a student. I'm 19, 20 years old, right? I need a job.
It makes sense. And I think the reason I'm coming to the question from that angle is because I remember the very first time I told someone in my family that I wanted to be a guide. And it was not because I saw it as an opportunity to make money. I remember I told my now ex-wife from many, many years ago, I said, you know what? I think I want to be a fishing guide. I want to be a fly fishing guide. And she looked straight at me and said, that's the dumbest effing idea that I've ever heard. So I guess that's why it's coming to like, oh, why did you want to do this? But it makes total sense.
No, I would love to say there was a higher calling or I thought about it a bit more, but
look where it led you.
Yeah, exactly. I was 19 or 20 in a foreign city,
All right.
It was a job.
So then the next question is, because when I was that age and needed a job, I was working in restaurants and I didn't like it. I kind of hated it. So did you this was your opportunity to make money. I get it. It makes sense. Did you actually well, let me ask you this. What did you enjoy most about it?
I loved it. I actually turned out to really love it. And I think I loved it for the fact that it got me into the museums and seeing stuff. The fact that no two tours were the same, because you get different people. You get different people with different interests, different levels of knowledge, different priorities. And love particularly about the Vatican museums. I don't know if you've ever been, but they are vast, absolutely vast. And you walk in and, you're trying to talk about Laocoon, which is this incredible sculpture from ancient Greece. And you're chatting about it and the history and what you know about it. And then somebody will ask a question about one of 1,000 sculptures in there, but you don't know the artist because nobody does. You don't know the era because, well, it's in this room, so it's got to be there. And therefore, it always tested me as well, because even if I didn't know the answer, I didn't want to just say I don't know, because you're the guide, right? And you're there to help people and to bring it to life. So even if I couldn't answer the question directly about that one, I would know about the one next door to it, or I could turn it into something. And it was always challenging. And therefore, I had to use my brain. I needed to use my brain, and I was having to use my brain. But also, I got to go through the Raphael rooms every single day, or see the Sistine Chapel every single day.
How big were the groups typically? I'm sure it fluctuated, but are we talking you're with a small family, or do you have the flag waving around so everybody can follow you with 30 people following you? What was that like?
A bit of both. You could have a private group of 2 or 3 who book you privately, or you could have 25, 26, 30 people, which was always a bit more of a challenge. And it always took that much longer to get through. And I never had a flag. I'm not very good with the flags. And the only 2 people I ever lost on any tour, when it was a bigger tour, it was a Saturday in high season. And my sister was living in Florence, and my mother had come over to stay with us, and they were on the tour, and then they weren't.
Really?
I was like, the only 2 people. Well, we didn't listen to you. I was like, family.
That is funny.
And you just disappeared. I was like, I went when I said I was going.
Yeah, I've been that person recently. Within the last 6 months, I was on a kind of a group tour. Not a particularly well organized group tour. It wasn't anything that anybody I've ever discussed on the show or anybody set this up, so I'm not pointing any fingers. I actually was in the country of Georgia, and I'd met a friend, and she said, we set up this tour. Do you want to go? So we got on a bus, and it was, I don't know, it was an interesting trip, but it wasn't the level that I
You're not rushing back.
But anyway, yeah. But anyway, I was that guy that we stood there. There were probably 15 people, and she said, okay, you wander around the abbey or the whatever it was, and be back at 15 after. And I heard 50 after, which is so random. Why would anybody say 50 after? And I looked at my phone. I was like, wow, that's a lot of time to just wander around. I guess, oh well. So I went and wandered and found a place to sit down for a while. I was like, well, I guess we've got some time to kill. So I'm sitting there, and fortunately my friend had my WhatsApp number and called and said, Jason, where are you? You were supposed to be back at 15 after. So I was that guy. And I'm sure you.
They wasn't doing that. They'd gone to get water or something and had just they just decided. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're the only two people I lost, so it's fine.
I used to joke that the number one rule in the guidebook, like when you learn to be a guide, the number one rule is come back with the same number you left with, right?
Count them in, count them out.
Come back with the same number, it's a success. And
Yeah,
of course,
exactly.
I was doing some outdoor guiding, so but I usually only had 2 or 3 people, so it was a little easier to keep track. So what was your least favorite part? Because remember, we talked earlier about the question of what did you not like, or what, tell me about a bad experience. So what was the part you liked the least about this work?
I think sometimes it's the story of life. You just got unpleasant people. It didn't happen very often, but sometimes you'd get a couple, let's for example, on a group, and one just didn't want to be there. And they were the sort of person whose energy infected everyone else. And then it became really hard work, because if they're bringing the whole mood down, it actually doesn't matter what you're doing. So those were the most difficult days, because actually you're not doing anything different. You're not doing anything wrong. You're doing what you're trying to do. But you've got someone who just doesn't want to be there. And
How
their
did
wife or their husband or their partner has said, you will be there.
Are you able to, as people, we just feel things. So this might be a difficult question to answer, but are you able to put your finger on the type of behaviors or describe the type of behaviors that you would see that would give you that? Or is it just a general, just like, she's kind of
Just a general, sometimes it was just unpleasant or unhelpful or snide remarks, or just, the tension between them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always what they're saying or doing. It's just there's something going on there, and that's made everyone else stand on edge.
And speaking as somebody who has guided a lot of people, been with a lot of guides, and just really enjoy shared experiences, that's my highest value. I figured that out a few years ago. My highest value is shared experiences. And working as a guide, a lot of my energy would kind of come from the group, to be honest. I guess it's maybe they call it kind of that empathic type of person that might want to be a guide. So if at the end of the day, everybody's happy and excited, then I'm just like, I'm dopamine hit like crazy. And I'm just like, wow, my life is great. And at the same time, you get somebody crabby like that. And at the end of the day, you feel like, man, why wasn't I able to do that? That wasn't very good. That didn't feel good. And you have to kind of step out and say, it's not always about you, Jason.
Yeah, but it also really, really used to bug me, because I'm like, these other people you're now affecting the enjoyment of the whole group.
Yeah.
And that's not fair, because they do want to be here and they pay to be here, and I'm doing what I should be doing. But those that shout the loudest often get the most attention, rightly or wrongly, but you try and shut it down. And so even if you're not giving them the most attention visually or in your communication, your brain is trying to work out how to navigate this to make sure that everyone is happy, which is taking up bandwidth, which you just shouldn't have to do. And so it did really irritate me, but I hopefully didn't let it show.
Curious, would you rather? Well, first off, did you figure out any tricks? Like, because there's people listening to this that are guides or want to be guides, or just people that are interested in the whole topic. Are you able to put your finger on any tricks that you figured out how to kind of, I don't know what the word is, not disarm them, but to integrate them better? Any little mind tricks that you were able to pull?
Not mind tricks, but if I had a moment where, say, we were walking around the wall of the museum to be able to get into the museum from San Pietro, if I had a moment and I could just chat to them quietly and learn their interests, don't say, why don't you want to be here, or why are you being an
what's your
idiot?
problem? You're ruining this for everybody.
Exactly.
It's not going to help, is it?
Not quite that blunt, and it's not going to help. But if you say, so what do you enjoy? What do you like? Yeah, and then you learn that actually what they want, they're not interested in the papal history, but they are interested in, I don't know, the painting, or they're interested in gladiators, or, you try and then go into the sculpture gallery. And when you're talking about a sculpture, you'll find one which was representative of a gladiator. And you very subtly, they don't know you've done it, but you've kind of tried to bring them in, because you're talking about the sport or the Olympics or all of that. But it's really difficult, because if you can't get them on their own, you can't have that sort of quick conversation. They might not give you the information anyway. But I think that was one of my things that I used to try.
Love that, because I've heard it said long ago, and I think I'm learning it, the thing is not always the thing. So we can look at somebody and say they're just pissed off, they're a difficult person, or we can imagine that the fight maybe they had the evening before about, are we going on the art tour or are we going on the food tour?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you ended up on the art tour. So maybe when you pull them aside, hey, so what are your interests? I mean, what have you enjoyed most, during your time here in Rome or whatever? And they say, oh, the food. And then maybe this may be a horrible example, but maybe if you can look at a piece of art and say, this piece of art inspired so and so to make
But you
this
don't even have
type
to
of
say that. You can say,
plastic.
have you tried this bar? Go to this bar, go to this restaurant, and you suddenly engage them on their level. And sometimes I think it's not necessarily that people are grumpy. Sometimes just asking somebody a question and listening to them just totally dissipates anything anyway. Even if you haven't hit that nugget that it is actually food or anything else, you just said, how are you? It's somebody asking them a question, and as somebody, a third party, you're the guide. The fact that they've sort of singled you out to ask you how you are, you don't know you're being grumpy, because how often are we so self-aware that we know? Sometimes we know, but sometimes we don't realize the effect we're having on everyone else. So you don't know that that's why they've done it, but they singled me out. That makes me feel quite good, and it just helps.
I love that. And it could be as simple as, well, honestly, I ate something last night that didn't sit well with me and I'm uncomfortable. And now you've got an opportunity. Mary probably would like to know where the nearest bathroom is right now or whatever. And maybe we can take a little break, and I can say, hey, Mary, this is your chance. And I'll distract everybody while you're gone. Nobody will even know you're gone. I mean, that's sounds a little silly the way I'm saying it, but you know what I mean, right?
Listening to people. It's travel. It's a people. I mean, it's a people business, and that sounds really stupid, but it is a relationship.
It doesn't
business.
sound stupid at all. I love it.
It's about, and particularly what I'm doing, it's about that relationship. And if you're interested in people, and I am, and I like people, then actually, it's fascinating. You meet great people, you hear some extraordinary stories, but getting to know someone and getting to know the nuances, what is actually works for them, is just, it makes it right for them.
Yeah, I love it. I do remember a similar situation. I used to, when I was fly fishing guide, we would get on a drift boat and we'd float down the river all day. And we would usually have waders on. So my clients would have, chest waders all the way up to their shoulders, and they show up at the boat ramp. And if it was a couple, oftentimes, the spouse, she might not be that happy to be there. She's like, I can't believe I'm going to be on a boat with my husband and some other guy that I don't know all day in the sun. I don't want to drink any water because I don't want to have to stop and go to the bathroom, because I don't want to have to ask to go to the bathroom. And I don't know what I'm going to do with these waders, and how is there even going to be a place to go? And there was so much anxiety about that in the morning that guys never think of. It's just
you don't
fortunate
have
in
to.
that regard. And so I quickly learned that if I've got a lady in the boat, I pull her aside and I say, here's the plan. There are outhouses down along the river. We're going to stop a couple times, and I'll take your husband. We can go fish. I'll point out the outhouse, whatever. And just rest assured that you're not going to be in a situation where you're like, geez, I got to ask these guys to stop. And and then now all of a sudden they would drink more water, which was great because it's hot out there.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated. So just those little things. So I can tell you've done this probably a lot more than I have. You've picked up a lot of things. That's cool. Okay. What's the best way to move this conversation from guiding to Kilimanjaro? Because I know that's where you wanted to start.
I mean,
we put that off for the last 30 minutes. So now let's talk about Kilimanjaro.
Well, I think, to finish Rome, I came back, got a proper job in London. Nothing to do with travel. Still people, but not travel.
Was it art? Was it art? What kind of work was it?
No, it was working for a magazine.
Okay.
So it was totally different. And then I sort of fell into becoming an estate agent, which was fine, but it wasn't a passion.
So estate agent sounds to me like real estate. Is that what we're talking about?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Real estate, selling and selling real estate.
Yeah, I did that for a few years too. It was for someone like you
right?
and I, it's kind of like,
yeah. I, as I say, volunteered for this charity we decided to run a Kilimanjaro climb to raise some funds. And I thought that if I was asking everyone else, I should probably go up myself. And then I read about it, but I'd already signed up, so I was locked in. So that was that. And as a kind of carrot to myself, I booked a 4-day safari in the Masai Mara afterwards. That was my treat. Everyone's, no, I'll go to the beach. I was like, I can go to the beach anytime. I'm in Africa. I'm going on safari. And from the moment I landed in Arusha for Kilimanjaro, you get off the bus or get off the plane, and it's this overwhelming assault on your senses. It's the sounds, it's the smells, it's the feel, it's just everything. And I was totally hooked. Kilimanjaro had 4 days in the Masai Mara where I could have quite happily missed my flight home. I wouldn't have minded at all. Came back to London. Really now was a frustrated wildlife photographer because I realized the opportunity out in Africa was immense.
And
But also,
here you are in London.
and
There's
here I
not
am
as
in
many
London.
wildlife photography opportunities. I do want to ask you a little bit more about Kilimanjaro, because you just kind of
Yeah.
passed over that well, then we made a sandwich and you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit. I mean, I'm going to ask you, did you summit? Because not everybody does.
We did summit. We did take a longer route, which really helps. And they built an extra day in to help the acclimatization. When we went up via Gilman's Point, and then you go across to Uhuru. So once you get to Gilman's Point, you have they say that you have summited because you've basically got, I think it's an extra 100 meters between Gilman's and Uhuru. But we weren't allowed to go around to Uhuru when we did it because the weather had been beautiful during the day and incredibly cold at night. But what that meant was that when you go between the 2 points, you're walking around the edge of a crater on an ice shelf. And this ice had melted to such an extent it was now dangerous and it was melting that morning. It was dangerous. It wasn't wide enough for 2 feet to go together. So they had closed the bit between the two for safety. So
it sounds
I got
like
to
you made
Gilman's,
it
I didn't get to Uhuru.
Okay, so you got to the top. You just didn't get to the place where the sign was that everybody
Exactly.
stands in front of and takes
Yeah,
the
you
picture.
still get a certificate saying you summited and all of that, but you just don't get exactly that, the sign.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I did. I summited, and I promised myself.
Did you enjoy it or did you hate it?
Did I enjoy it or did I hate it? There are a number of things I loved, and a number of things I hated, and a number of things that surprised me.
Okay, let's give us a couple of each.
I loved being in Africa. I loved the mountain. I loved speaking to the guides. I loved that a couple of us in our group, because porters take priority on the trails. So if a porter's coming past, you get out of their way, which is absolutely as it should be. But it meant if you're walking as a group, and people spread out, they pan out across the whole path. And so if a porter comes along, you stop, you have to find your way into a single file, and then you can start going again. And that rhythm is actually quite difficult when you're already struggling to breathe. It's much better, I found, just get into a rhythm very slow and just keep going. And so a couple of us sort of let the rest of the group go on ahead, and we'd follow 50 meters behind, 50 yards, not that far behind, but far enough that when the stop happened, we could carry on and then let it go again. But what it meant was that, and we hadn't planned this and it hadn't been, we hadn't even thought about it, was that actually we had a guide with us the entire time. We got to chat to them. We got to learn about how important the mountain is to the local people and what it means to them, and the plants or the actual plant life that we were seeing, or on the lower slopes, some of the wildlife or bird life that we were seeing. I think that is what I loved. I loved learning a bit more about it rather than just walking up the mountain. I loved the group. We became great friends. Loved the fact that I got there because I never had to do it again. And
I get it.
Promised myself that I would never eat porridge ever again, and I never have, because I didn't like porridge before. It's the texture; it just doesn't do it for me. And I knew going up that I needed it because you're burning through the calories. So I was a very good girl, and I had my porridge every morning, and I hated every single mouthful. But the last morning when
What
we were doing,
what do you wish? I suspect at times you were thinking, wish instead of porridge, oh, wouldn't it be great if we got to camp and there was X, Y, or Z? I don't want to put any words in your mouth. Were
But the
you
food was
fantasizing
really
about
good.
anything?
No, you just get on and eat it, and it's breakfast, and I don't usually eat breakfast anyway. So therefore, the whole thing is just beyond me, and it's probably 6 o'clock in the morning, and you can't breathe because you're too high altitude. Or you can, but everything just is harder work, and so I just ate it, but I promised myself I was never going to eat it ever again. And even the morning that we were just coming downhill, because we'd summited and we'd come down again, and all we had to do was the last bit down. I didn't have my porridge. Never had it since.
But for dinner,
It's a
you
texture thing.
were you so that was just for breakfast? So like in the evenings, did you have something different than you enjoyed?
Yeah, no, food was really good. We had fresh fruit all the time. We had freshly cooked meals. Not, you're not talking Michelin star. You're just talking
Well, yeah, yeah.
fuel efficient food.
I I imagined that you were telling me that you ate porridge for every meal for
So
how many days were you on the mountain? Five or
we were
six?
there 7 nights on the mountain, 8 days.
7 nights? Yeah, okay. All right. So it wasn't porridge for 7 nights.
No.
But it still left a mark.
It was just at every breakfast, and then I forced it, and it's left a mark,
All
and I've
right.
never eaten it again.
Okay, so I heard a couple things you liked. I heard a couple things you didn't like. On the surprises, maybe those are the same, but were there a couple surprises? And this could be relevant because you probably have this conversation with clients that are going to do it.
Yeah. I think the surprise that was that, you know you're going to do it. You do a lot of work in the gym or walking. We had some practice walks. And so physically you're fit enough. And actually, it was a friend who said to me, it's just one night of your life for the final summit. And I think that was a really good thing she said to me, because as I went up, and the surprise was the mental challenge. I think that Kilimanjaro, yes, it's a physical challenge, but don't underestimate the mental challenge as well. I think people who are super fit and super confident are probably the people who are least likely to summit, because they take the lower slopes too fast, because it's easy. It's not complicated walking. It's not dangerous walking, and it's not, uncomfortable walking. It's not a high gradient. It's just a nice walk through some forest to begin with. And so they do that too quickly, and they don't give their bodies time to acclimatize. And even though we had had the extra night on the mountain than most people did at that stage, and we'd acclimatized pretty well, going up that final night and you summit overnight was extraordinary, because I don't think I'd realized the effect of altitude on the body until then. And I knew I was fit enough. It was
For
just
those,
the,
well, I was just going to say, for those people that haven't been at altitude like that, how would you
mm,
describe that? How would you describe it?
like walking through treacle.
Walking through what? What is that? Treacle?
Okay.
I'm hearing you
It's
wrong.
like really, really thick syrup.
Okay. All right.
Just the effect on the body is there's so little oxygen that everything becomes much harder work. So you think you're walking at a normal pace, and you're looking at somebody else going, "Oh, I'm walking slowly." And then you realize you're going that pace as well.
I have heard that on Kilimanjaro.
It's extraordinary. And look, that's why I think a lot of people fail, because they underestimate that it's so important to acclimatize on the lower slopes, almost more important on the lower slopes than it is. So by the time you get to a certain level, your body has begun to learn that it's got less oxygen. If you just go up the lower slopes quite quickly, and then you expect your body to deal with the higher slopes, you're going to have trouble.
So I hear that it's just hard. I hear it's, you're moving slow, you're working hard. I'm also imagining, I'm just imagining because I've been at altitude but not exerted myself like that. Is there kind of an anxiety edge? Because you mentioned mental, and I'm thinking, I would imagine there are probably times when I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot get enough air. This sucks, and I'm gonna die here on this mountain. Maybe that's a little extreme. I don't know. I haven't done it.
No, I think so. The night that we had 2 nights at the highest altitude camp that we could have done, which is where the extra night was built in. And on that full day, we actually did an acclimatization walk. So we walked to over 5,000, and then we came back down again. But when we were walking to over 5,000, we actually saw somebody being run off the mountain because they were unconscious. and they had 4 porters, and they were just running. And she was fine because they got her down fast enough and the body started regulating again. She was unconscious, she was breathing, and she was absolutely fine. But seeing that the night before you go up is a slightly startling reminder that this
Yeah.
is a mountain that, whilst it's not a complicated, hard technical walk, it is still at an altitude that can be dangerous if you underestimate it, or if your body just simply decides that it's too much on that particular day. So I think that was the wake up call, but it also means that you have to know that, listen to your guide, go with a good group. Don't do something cheap. Go with a good group. Go with somebody who is going to make sure that you're looked after, that you acclimatize properly, that you have the fresh food and nutrition to fuel your body the right way. We had, and all the groups I do, so the final ascent, there is at least one guide or porter per person going up. So
Okay.
everybody is 1-to-1. So it means that you don't have to keep with the group. You have got somebody with you who is going to be looking after you. You don't have to feel that you're falling behind. Just get there and get there at your own pace.
I love that we're having this conversation, and I hope that you'll take a clip of this conversation and share it with people getting ready to go, because, or even thinking about going, because this is really good stuff. I remember having a conversation with someone here on the show quite a while ago, and I won't mention any names. He's very capable, he's a mountain type of person. He's done it a lot. And my understanding was you have to have a guide. You can't just go up Kilimanjaro by yourself, I guess. And he was telling me how he hired a guide because he had to hire a guide, and basically told the guide, look, you're just going on a walk. You're just walking with me. You don't need to do anything. That's great. Everybody has their own levels and this and that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is somebody like him, and I'm not saying he would do it, but somebody that is super comfortable with it can go into, blogs or onto Reddit or onto YouTube and talk about, oh yeah, it's super easy. You don't really need a guide, but they're going to make you hire a guide. And if someone is listening to that, and they believe influencers, they've never climbed a mountain, they're thinking, well, if it's so easy, whatever. So I think it's important to have this conversation.
I think you're right. I've never thought of it that way before. I think, Kilimanjaro's peak is taller than Everest Base Camp, and people take a couple of weeks to get to Everest Base Camp.
I did not know that. That's it. Okay.
It's thereabouts. It might not be quite.
Okay. We won't hold you to that, but it's a serious endeavor.
It's a serious endeavor. Now, because you can do it in 6 or 7 days, it feels like it's not so significant, but it's a significant walk.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't ask you for stats or numbers of people that have gone, but I know not everybody makes it to the top. And you I don't think most people just show up and start the hike, but I don't know. You advise people more than I do. Well, I don't advise them at all on Everest or on Kilimanjaro. I definitely don't advise them on Everest. That's all.
No.
I'm not going up. I think when I was young and, 19, 20 and in the army and the infantry, I might have thought, yeah, that would be cool. And I've got that out of my system. No desire.
Yeah. When I got back, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go into Machu Picchu and I'm going to go to Everest Base Camp. And then I was like, well, why?
The world's a big place. There's a lot of cool things to see.
Yeah. It is slightly addictive, I think, because of that rush that you get, because you've been at altitude and you come back. It's why athletes train at altitude, isn't it? Because then when they come to a lower level, they've got so much more oxygen. They feel better, so that you get that endorphin rush, I guess, as well. But everyone does it differently, and everyone acclimatizes differently. And I don't want to over exaggerate its difficulty, but I equally don't think that you should underestimate its difficulty as well. You respect the mountain and you respect the porters and the guides. And I think that one of the things that I'm really, really sort of passionate about, if you like, about Kilimanjaro is that if you're going to go, use a company who are certainly in Tanzania, who are registered with the Kilimanjaro Porters Association. So the porters are looked after as well, because when we went up, not our group were properly clothed, properly booted, but we saw people going up in flip-flops and a sort of rain mat. We've got all this kit on, and you're just like, that is not acceptable. And they're carrying too much weight. Why? No, they need to be looked after as well. So don't skimp on it, do it properly, and enjoy it.
Well, you mentioned that the night, I think it was the night before you summited, you saw them running someone off the mountain, down
Yeah,
the
that was a
mountain.
wake up.
Those guys are kind of important. Guys, gals, whoever's doing that work, that's important.
I mean, and at the scree at that point, because it's that last bit up that route is scree. And so one of the reasons you go up overnight is because it's frozen. So it's easier to walk on. But of course, then it thaws during the day. So we were up during the day on that sort of, acclimatization walk. And so these guys' knees were sinking up to their knees whilst carrying this girl, and they were running off. So it's not easy work that they do.
And a tourist or a tour operator trying to save a few dollars. Yeah,
It's
I
not
don't know.
worth
Okay.
it.
All right. So thank you for sharing all of that. That's just fascinating conversation. It sounds like you really fell in love with the safari part afterwards. So I don't want to just skip past that like you just made a sandwich, right? Was there an aha moment? Because it kind of sounded like there was, and that's, Africa now is part of you, but the safari part, what was your biggest aha moment there?
I think just space. I grew up in the country in the UK, and whilst that doesn't have the open spaces that the US or Africa has, it's quite beautiful out here as well. But the space and the sights and the smells and the fact that you are so connected to the earth. You get up when it's light, you go to bed when it's dark, you are just much more in tune with it.
Tell me about the smells. I've been to Southern Africa a couple times, but I think you mentioned smells a couple times. I don't know if you're just particularly sensitive to smells, and it's really hard to describe. But for somebody, because I think people that have not been to Africa, they've seen, it used to be Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Now it's YouTube, where they would see these animals, so they can kind of imagine the sights. The smells might be a surprise.
I think that's what surprised me, and the sounds. I think that it's really difficult to describe, but it is a combination. It depends if you're in the city or if you're on safari. But let's say you're on safari, it's the combination of the dry. If you're in the dry season, let's go with the dry season for the moment. It's the dry, compacted earth and the heat of the sun that produces a smell straight away. And then you've got, as you're driving along, you might brush past some wild basils or wild herb of some description, which is so extraordinarily strong. And then you're near a herd of buffalo, hippo. Hippo, not necessarily the least smelly creatures in the world, and it's not necessarily a pleasant smell, but it's a sort of whole combination of all of that. And then with the first rains, we get it here. I love that first rain on really dry soil, and you get that chemical. It's one of my favorite words, is petrichor, and I just love that smell. That's just something amazing.
That's cool. We, having spent a good chunk of my life in Arizona, it's so dry, and then when it does rain, the plants just kind of release their oils and stuff, and it is such a cool thing. But also, I think part of Africa that's so cool for me is we were always in some sort of open aired safari vehicle.
Yep.
So that when you're driving through doing your safari, you're completely exposed to the air, which allows for those smells, and just even like if you drive under a tree, you can just feel that the temperatures and the winds, and it's kind of like, I had a motorcycle at one point. I drove across the US on this motorcycle. I bought the motorcycle like 3 days earlier. I didn't even have a license. That was dumb, but I did it. And I remember the thing I noticed most was like, oh my gosh, I smell everything.
Yeah.
because I'm out in the open air, and whether that's going through the plains of Kansas or whatever, the smells, and they would change as you went by a patch of trees or a creek or something like that. And people that have been exploring out and about, like take scenic drives with their windows up or whatever, and the air conditioner running, they just don't get that. So it is, the smells are very unique in Africa, and the opportunity to connect with it is different, I think. What do you think?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that if I was to sum it up in one word, is it's unsanitized. It
In a
it
good
is
way.
what it is.
I love
In a
that.
good way.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's real life. And because, as you say, you're in these open vehicles, you feel it, you experience it, you don't just see it.
What about in the city, like in Arusha or Nairobi? Or,
That
I mean, I'm sure
again,
you've been to quite a few.
different areas will have different smells, same with any city anywhere in the world. But I think there, because again, even though you're in a city, they're quite outdoors cities, if that makes sense. They're not all
Hmm.
tarmac, they're not all, infrastructure. There's a lot of earth and grass and trees. And so and then you have the live markets. So they bring their cattle in or their goats into the market to exchange and barter. So you've got still, animals and wildlife and the mix of the different smells and the different trees and the birds. They
What
don't
do you
necessarily smell, but they definitely add color.
think? I think it's coming up on lunchtime for me, so I'm thinking about food. So I'm going to ask you. I know you don't like porridge. We figured that out.
Sorry.
But are there smells, food related smells, or are you excited about the food in
Hey,
Africa? I mean, what do you tell people about it? When they ask about the food, what do you tell them?
I think if you're in any safari camp lodge, you're basically going to be fed extremely well. Generally Western food, Western style food at least. Sometimes with a twist. You might have, the sort of the carbohydrate might be their carbohydrate, just to give you a sense of it. There might be potatoes, rice, pasta as well, but you get the opportunity to actually try in different countries. It's called different things, but it's
Is it like
essentially maize meal.
ugali? Is there one that's
It's
called
in
ugali?
ugali or in shima or sadza. It slightly depends which country you're in, but it's maize meal basically. And
So
they will
corn,
have
corn. It's a corn base. Is
it's
that?
a corn base, and it's more like polenta
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yep.
if you
That
think
sounds
of
right.
polenta, but they'll make porridge out of it. So that's where they cook it more loosely, or they will make it into like a mashed potato. So that's when it's more like the sort of polenta. So, but in grain, it's much more like polenta.
Are you the type that when you are in town, you like to go out and have street food experiences? Or, yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I will remember one of the first times I went to Zanzibar and I was in Stone Town. I was there by myself. When I was living in Zambia managing camps. So I took a holiday up to Zanzibar and I was staying in Stone Town and I went out to Fiordani food market and it was just amazing because you've got all the drinks being freshly made, but it was sort of made out of all the fresh spices, so fresh ginger and lemongrass and all the sort of actual sugarcane things people now pay a fortune for because it's turmeric and ginger and things. But actually, there it's just a street food drink.
Just what it
You
is.
know,
Hey, I
or
just,
lobster on the barbecue, which they've grilled in some amazing spice, and you just go and have a kebab of that and a bit of that. It's amazing.
you, you called that what? I heard loathsome, but I don't think that's what you said.
No,
That they
what did I
grill?
say?
You said that they
Lobster,
grill it.
lobster.
Lobster. Don't you speak English? Just kidding.
I do
I
spoke
know
once.
you speak English. I speak North American English. I get that. I get the difference. Lobster. Okay.
Yeah, no, amazing. Just fresh and vibrant.
Hey, you just said something made me realize we've missed out on something because you went back to London after Kilimanjaro,
Yeah.
and then I just heard you say when I was managing camps, and was it Zambia, or I don't know, would have been Tanzania, right?
No, Zambia.
It was Zambia. Okay, so get us
Yeah.
to that point. How the heck did you end up doing that?
So I think I said before that I'd um Kilimanjaro came back. I was an estate agent, and I actually got, long story short, but I got made redundant. So I was trying to work out how I get back to Africa, but without having to pay to be on safari the entire time.
It's kind of like going to museums without having to pay to get in. You're
right?
smart. You're a smart woman.
Yeah. So I was like, how do I do this? I know I'll become a photographer. I'll take all these sort of qualifications and then I can try and find my way in that way. But then events overtook me. I got made redundant and I spoke to somebody who I knew who put me in touch with a couple of camps in Zambia and their season had already started. So I got interviewed by one on the telephone because it's obviously pre-Zoom and pre-Teams and all of that sort of thing. And literally flew out 10 days later, packed up the flat in London, go out to Zambia, landed in Zambia as this sort of fresh-faced English girl who had been to Africa once. I got told that I wasn't going to be at the lodge that they thought I was going to be at because somebody had left. So I needed to go to this camp called Machenja in the south of Mwangwa. And at that stage, when I was there, it was sort of the premier camp in that area at the time. 2 hours into the national park, tented, but with baths in the room, on the side, on the banks of the Luangwa River with the most incredible views, open air bathrooms, only 5 tents. And there I was deposited the next day. No internet, obviously. It's long before the likes of Starlink came into being. No mobile signal. Our only communication with the outside world was our two-way radio back to base. I just found my happy place. Yeah. I had the
Before
hippos for company. I had amazing crew that I worked with. I was as happy as I don't know, kid in the chocolate factory.
all right.
It was just amazing. Living
What
in
did
a
your
my room was made of grass. The shower was attached to an ebony tree. It was just
what did your friends and family think?
significant. I've lost the plot. So so I'll take you back a bit. When I went to, one of the surprising things I think is how it changed my life. But when I went back to Kilimanjaro, when I started Kilimanjaro, Dad looked at me and he said, "This could change your life." You know, whatever. And then it had. And so when I look back at it, I think I came back to the person. I had different priorities. I had different passions potentially. Although at that stage I possibly wouldn't have put them as a passion. Largely, I mean, my friends were all incredibly supportive. I missed a lot of weddings. You know, I was meant to only do it for 5 months. The problem was that I loved it too much, and the company said, "Do you want to stay?" And that was not a decision I had to make. That was just yes. So I think, yeah, it just bit me, and it
Wow.
bit me hard.
So I don't want to make any assumptions, but everything I'm hearing sounds like you did this as a solo woman picking up and moving to Africa to manage a camp where presumably I managed a lodge in Belize. It's not Africa, but there were challenges. And I was with a partner, and I'm trying to imagine being there by myself where you've got either your guests or your
hmm
staff.
hmm
Both can be great.
hmm
Honestly, both are wonderful, but the guests are usually there for a few days, gone. And new group of guests. So constant new group of guests. And then your staff, I'm going to try and be very tactful. They are living sometimes in difficult conditions as well, where maybe they're not as excited to be there as you are, because maybe they are. I don't know. You can tell me, but oftentimes in places like that, they're away from their families for extended periods of time. I'm imagining that they probably share a bunkhouse of some sort, so they don't
We
necessarily have a
had,
lot of, I don't know, you tell me.
well, we had, they shared a room. So there were two per room. So it wasn't like a bunkhouse. It was just two per room. I was the only female in the camp. I was certainly the only sort of on the staff. I was the only white female in camp. But we
And the
didn't
only
have it.
probably person from overseas that didn't grow up in
I'm
the
the only
country.
person from overseas. Everyone else came from the local
That's
town.
challenging.
It was one of the most rewarding things I could have done because you are immersed in this life. And I was told before I went that Zambians are incredibly friendly. And my goodness, are they? They are just fabulous fun. And we had a ball. We just had a ball because I think as long as, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, what you're doing, what your job is. I think if you meet people, if you're prepared to do what they're doing, they will meet you more than halfway. So I'd never ask them something that I wasn't prepared to do myself, with the exception of getting rid of a snake, because Apparently, I don't do those. So they understood that and they were very nice to me. But otherwise, I mean, we used to have fun because you're living, these guys become your family. So you either become, oh, well, I'm the only woman and I'm the only white woman. And that's a very, very stupid thing to do because you're missing out on chatting to them, learning about them, learning about their life, learning about their culture, learning about what makes them tick, having a laugh, just enjoying being a family in camp. And there was sort of 14, 15 of them at any one time and me, and we just had a great time.
I wonder how similar it is to my experience in Belize was I loved getting to know the staff. There's always a
Yep.
challenge because there's always well, I'm I don't want to say the boss. I don't like that word, but
Yeah.
the guy that owns the place is going to ask me why the tractor got broken. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you have to create that.
Yes.
But I think if they respect you, and I think you earn their respect by getting your hands dirty as
Yes.
well. So I'd be in the
Yes.
kitchen
Yes.
helping them cook, or I'd be making the beds, or I'd be, if that's
Hmm.
what they needed me to do, or they'd say, Lucinda, butt out because we've got this. Can you go and, go and do whatever you need to do? And I had other roles, I had to I get all the orders right, and I had to do all the menus, and I had to do all the sort of room allocations. So there was,
Hmm.
you all have a role within camp, and you don't step on that role. And of course, look, families, whoever you're with, are always going to have moments. But never was there a moment where I thought, I'm so unhappy here. And I was never unhappy.
Yeah.
I just find them incredibly respectful. In fact, when at the end of the season, we would have a sort of, end of season party in the village, I'd meet all their wives and their kids. And that was just lovely because then you don't get a chance during the season. But they wanted me to meet their families. And so that meant that I'd actually got it right somehow.
It's I'm not surprised. You've got that personality. I, I'm curious if it ever happened to you because I got quite close to some of the staff and they would share things with me that, after a while, I felt like they really accepted me when they started forgetting that I don't understand Creole. Like
Yeah.
when they'd come around the corner and just start talking to me in Creole, I was
Yep.
like, you think you've accepted me now because they're very good at turning it off and on with the guests and with other people that are not from Belize. But one thing that I got a few times is in Belize, and maybe the same in Africa, is oftentimes they will hire someone from outside the country to come in and live at a lodge and run
Mhm.
a lodge. That was definitely the case where I was at. And a few times somebody on the staff would say, I don't know why they have to bring somebody in from the US or the UK to run the lodge. They think we can't do it ourselves. And then I'd look at them, I'd say, would you want my job? Like, no, nobody on the staff wanted it because I had to live on they got to go home. They got to go home every, 7 to 10 days and spend a few days with their family or whatever. And they didn't have the headaches. And in the afternoon, when they were done guiding or done with the
Yeah.
landscaping, they'd go hang out in the barracks, I call them barracks, bunkhouse, whatever, and drink their rum and listen to the radios and just have a nice time. And I was sitting with the guests until 10, 11 o'clock at night. But anyway, does that sound familiar?
Yes and no. I think they liked having a buffer between the two because you can be the bridge between. And actually, what I'm really pleased to see now is that they taking fewer people from Europe and they're employing more local people because they've brought them up through the system and they can train them and they've got sort of courses specific to it. But I think at the time it was still seen as a sort of, you had to be able to relate to the guests because particularly in the camps where I worked, very often across Africa still, dinners are hosted every night. So it's like having a house party. And if you've got people who don't always get on, if you've got people who are talking about something that the guide has no knowledge of or interest in, it's actually your role to bring it back to where we are, to stop any friction that there might be, but to also include the guide so that the guide isn't just sitting there. They're not just a token. They're actually, so you can let the conversation go wild, but then you just sort of say, so, whatever the guide's name is, what are we doing tomorrow? Or where were the lions today?
Hmm.
What were the lions doing today? Because I know he's already told me, but actually it's kind of let's bring it back This is where we are. Let's enjoy where we are. And so I think having somebody who understood that and could relate on both sides did help a bit for the staff, particularly for the guides, because the guides are the ones who are hosting as well and sitting there and, suddenly being talked about by the politics of UK politics or American politics. They don't necessarily have the same information that you and I have, which is probably a good thing. And nor do they have the interest because they've got their own politics and they've got their own system and they've got their own troubles within the country. So instead of talking about what we talk about in London or America somewhere, why don't we talk about, if you want to talk politics, why don't you ask the guide about Zambian system or politics or whatever to try and bring it back. So I think having that person as the bridge was always a good thing.
Well, yeah, I agree. And probably significantly for the guests that are visiting, because, many of them, this is their first time to Africa, and they're not going to figure it all out in the first few days. And if they've got potential, and that's obviously Africans can absolutely host these lodges, and somebody coming from the UK that shows up there feeling a little bit of a overwhelm and disconnect culturally may not the lodge manager, maybe she's from Zambia or he's from Zambia and he's amazing, but it's going to take them 4 days before they even realize they can have a conversation with people because they're a little overwhelmed sometimes. And when there's someone there with a familiar face, familiar accent, and a familiar, common ground, it's so much easier to walk over to that person like you. Hey, listen, this is our first time to Africa. We're not sure how to, talk to the guide about what we want to see or whatever, right?
Or what should we do about tips? That was always the big one.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Tips? That's a really good example.
But they feel that they can ask me much more than the guide.
Yeah. And if there was, I think this is a story I have in my head. Like, I'll use the example of Belize. If one of my staff in Belize became the manager and was the one having dinner with the guests every night and I think it would be hard for many of our guests to walk up to, I'll use an example, Michael. Maybe he's the guy. I think it's harder for them to walk up to Michael, who sounds like, and has very cultural similarity with all of the guides and the staff. It's harder to walk up to Michael and say, hey, Michael, how much should we tip? They'd walk up to me, no problem. Like, cause I look like I'm the odd guy out. They'd walk up to me and say, hey, Jason, help us figure out how much to tip the staff. And they'd have a completely honest conversation with me because they didn't see me as the guy that was going to go back and drink rum with the staff in the evening. And, so-and-so said this and said that. And this is just a perception in their head. I'm not saying that's what would happen.
No, I agree. And also, they're probably not going to tip you, right? So therefore, there's not this embarrassment that, I can't ask them because...
you don't want to ask the person you get a tip, how do I handle tips? It seems weird, right?
Yeah. So you're more comfortable asking somebody that you're not going to tip, which is perfect as well. I mean, we all know it doesn't matter how much information tour operators send out or you put in the room about that sort of thing, they're still going to ask.
Yeah,
human nature.
They're not going to read it, or if they do, they're not going to believe it. And that's fine. I get that. That's human nature. Because you could say, you get to be tactful about this as somebody that's set up a lot of trips and led a lot of trips. And say, oh, well, how much should we tip? In your head, you're like, didn't you read the trip planner that I put all that time and effort into putting together? And if it's a super fun, playful person, they have said that, just jokingly, and they say, well, yeah, I read it. And I'm like, oh, you just didn't believe me? Well, no, I didn't.
Just didn't take it in.
I thought maybe it got outdated or, whatever. Yeah. So anyway, so you were managing camps. How long were you managing camps in Africa?
I did 4 seasons. But I was there during the rains as well. So it wasn't quite 4 years, but in terms of the safari season, it was 4 safari seasons. But then I did 3 rainy periods as well. Then I got I got hit on the wrist by a falling sausage fruit. That's just it.
Wait.
Yeah, so that takes some unpacking, right?
You got hit on the wrist?
Mm-hmm.
or the head, okay, by a what kind of fruit?
Sausage.
Which is comes from a sausage tree,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
There's a camp. There's a camp in Zambia called Sausage Tree,
Uh-huh.
isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So sausage trees are Kigelia africanus in Latin. They are, if you can imagine a sort of oak tree. I don't know what the equivalent is. You know what an oak tree is, right? That's sort
An
of
oak tree, a big strong tree, oak. Yeah.
so big, strong tree, quite tall, and then it has dangling from it on incredibly thin strings, really, things that look like salamis, sausages. So you
You
can
sound like
imagine
you're.
a
You
salami
sound
in
like
its skin.
when you talk about the very thin strings, it sounded like you were thinking about contacting a lawyer about how these trees are designed.
Well, really, I
These
mean,
are not safe. This was poorly designed. It needs to be improved. Go ahead.
this is a 15-kilo pod on a really flimsy string. And yeah, that they are ubiquitous in Zambia. They're known as the supermarket tree because the impala they've got incredibly pretty red flowers which drop. But so the impala and the baboons and the monkeys and the puku and the antelopes love that, love them. In fact, if anyone's seen David Attenborough's Kingdom, his latest show, that was in Zambia, and that will show you a leopard that had learned how to hunt out of one of those trees. All the impala came down and it to jump and land on an impala. And that's where I was based.
The good thing you got hit by a fruit instead of a leopard.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Just looking at the bright side.
Yeah, it was, it's just one of those freakish things. We used to take the sausages off any trees in the guest areas, but because we had quite a big back of house and there were so many trees, we didn't do that back of the house. And we just had a meeting in the afternoon and I was walking back towards my room and I had papers in one hand and my right wrist was down and I walked under the tree and the next thing I know, there's blood everywhere. I squealed and I'm holding my arm and this whole thing is full of blood and it hurts like. And a 15-kilo sausage fruit had hit me. Long story short, the blood was just from where my ring had cut through my skin. The guides, to give you an idea of the force of it, the guides had done, so one of the guys who'd had the meeting had seen it come off the branch because they'd seen a little squirrel just above it. And we knew which sausage it was, obviously, because it hit me. And so they did a calculation. It was the equivalent of a 357 rifle bullet hitting me. That was the force of this fruit pod hitting my wrist. So my wrist was down, luckily. Well, if it had been up, it would have broken it, but it wasn't. It was down. So it did have somewhere to go, which is why it had gone past the ring and cut the skin down to the bone. That's fine. Incredibly painful. You're in the middle of a national park. You take arnica and ice, probably some diclofenac, bandaged it, and carry on. Which is pretty much what I did for a week. So, and then went off duty. Stayed with some friends who were managing another camp, and one of their guests happened to be an orthopedic surgeon on honeymoon. And his wife looked at him and said, "Don't you dare." And she then made the mistake, thankfully, of going to the bathroom after dinner and was sitting at this beautiful table under the stars. And he said, "Quick, while she's gone to the bathroom, let me look." So he ran round and ultimately what had happened, and he put it back over a glass of wine. I dislocated my thumb and all the bones in my wrist had been knocked out of alignment.
Ooh.
So he put it all right, but it got to the point where I could only move my fingers and my elbow. I couldn't actually move my wrist. So longer story short, I came back to the UK for treatment.
All right. Then sorry to hear all that. Thanks for sharing it.
Who gets hit by a sausage fruit, right? It's quite amusing. It's like being hit by a coconut.
It's such a better story than we in Belize, we had the coconut trees and we were there 8 months and I can't believe nobody got hit by a coconut. You'd be walking through the place and you'd hear one thud, pretty close to you. And you're like, man, yeah. So but the sausage tree is that's just a more exotic, cooler story. The coconut's kind of cliche.
Funny, isn't it? I mean, sausage hitting you.
And here we are laughing about it right before you told me about you couldn't move your wrist.
Oh no, I mean, to be honest with you, I was laughing even when it happened because, quite frankly, I can't believe this has happened.
Wow.
Well, fizzy and knock, and I'm absolutely a-okay, fine. But it brought me back to the UK, and my friends all love sausage trees because it brought me home.
Oh, yeah. All right. Very cool. A gift from above, let's say. Uh,
Exactly that. Yeah.
all right. So, how did you get from there to Ganders Travels, where we started this conversation? Ganders
Yeah.
Travel, I should say.
When I got back, I found a job quite quickly working for another tour operator. So I knew that the treatment wasn't going to be quick. So I needed to find something to keep me occupied. And I started worked for another tour operator and did that for 13 years, nearly 13 years. Various things, not one thing in particular, but various things happen that make you sometimes sit up and think what you want. And it was a really nice company. It was a small company. There was nowhere else for me to go. I'd sort of done what I could there and I was incredibly comfortable. So I left. I knew that I had to make myself uncomfortable to find the next challenge. I think I said earlier in the conversation, I need a challenge. I need to be sort of, kept busy and make my brain work. So
And you knew that sitting at the desk there, a sausage fruit wasn't gonna fall on you and
exactly that.
create
Yeah,
the
I
change.
needed a
So it was
little
going to be
bit
up to you
more
to do it. Yeah.
jeopardy. So I left and didn't know what was next. It slightly felt like I imploded my life. So I knew I didn't want to go to just another tour operator and do the same thing for them because that would just be stupid. But maybe I could go down the marketing route or I could do something else. And my business partners, so I've got business partners, heard that I'd resigned. I'd known them for years and they approached me and Ganders was born. Long story short, they did come to me because they're international fly fishing specialists up on the couch. And, well, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. I, I don't know. They said, well, come and chat. And I did say to them that I don't eat fish and I get seasick in a puddle. So possibly wasn't the best person to come on board with that. But it transpired that that's not what they actually wanted. So, yeah, Ganders Travel was born.
What are you most excited about with your business right now?
I mean, I love the fact that so we launched in the end of September 2023. And so we're 2.5 years in now. And I love that every day is different. Every day is a challenge. Every day I'm learning something new. I'm doing something on the marketing or the account side. Yeah, I know I know, and I've done a lot of travel and I've got a lot of experience in Africa itself and the trips themselves and the areas and what would work and what doesn't from a client's perspective. But what I needed and what I've got now is the challenge of actually making this work. But I've also got control over imagery and something as basic as the logo, and I can thank my sister for that because she's an artist and she did the logo for me. So, you've got all this stuff coming in, which just means it's quite personal and I have direct control over. So I'm excited to see where we can go, grow it and maybe expand into different countries eventually. But for the moment, we need to sort of really build on the base that we've got and I don't go to work every day because I actually enjoy what I do. So, that old saying, yeah.
Because I know we've got some listeners that are working as planners or different positions with tour operation companies that maybe have thought, I need to get outside of my comfort zone, or I'd love to be able to control the logo, for example. So they're thinking about maybe doing it. What's the biggest piece of advice either around the type of personality, like what's the reality of what someone maybe thinks it's going to be about, but then is going to find out later? Or I don't know if you know where I'm going with that, but what would you say to them?
I think it had been suggested to me a few times before that I should do this on my own by family members, by my partner, and I wasn't ready. And then, as I say, various things happen, nothing that you can put but it felt the right time to make myself uncomfortable, which is ultimately what I did. I think if you are thinking about doing it, do it for the right reasons. Don't just do it because you can do it. Do it for the right reasons. Do it for you, but do it because you can think you could maybe be able to do something slightly differently. We're all in this business because we love travel. We love experiencing new things. We love meeting people. And you definitely, I'm still traveling every year, but I'm not traveling 3 times a year anymore because I can't be away from the office as much as that. So don't think just because you're going to own it that you can travel as much as you want. Because actually the reality is that running a business is very different, but it is really rewarding as well. So I wouldn't ever say to somebody, don't do it, but I'd say just do it for the right reasons.
For the right reasons is definitely the important part. You mentioned earlier that you worked in real estate sales.
Mm.
I don't know what your reason for doing that was. Maybe that was money. Maybe you thought, well, I'm
Just
good
fell
with
into
people.
it.
Yeah, I'm good with people. Yeah, whatever. This other than when you do something, when you do something for the right reason, it tends to be enjoyable, tends to be successful. If you do it for somebody else because somebody else is telling you, wow, you've got a great personality, you should go be a real estate agent. And you're like, well, really, what I want to do is travel the world with a suitcase. There's a conflict there, you know?
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure that out. But like you said, what I've also noticed in the tourism business, you know, because I've worked for tour operations, I've had my own tour operating business. When you are kind of, I don't want to say at the bottom, but in the trenches when you're leading trips or, you know, a guide, you've got a lot of time to go around and see stuff. And as you work your way up, I noticed, you know, I worked for a tour operation company for 9 years, and I started out, I was traveling all the time. And after 9 years, I was running the business, and I hadn't traveled in a year or so.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's just hard to do it. You're like, well, I really feel like I need to be here, and I've got younger junior associates who need to get out and see these places. I've already seen
I
a lot
need
of these
them to
places.
see it. I need them to learn
Yeah,
it.
so I can't be gone and them. You know, I can't have one of them in Mongolia, another one in Africa, and then I'm going to be in Iceland. It just doesn't work. So I found myself holding down the fort while the junior associates would go out and do it. And then I realized, oh, that's the way it was when I was one of the junior associates. My boss wasn't traveling very often. So yeah, it's so if you're a travel planner and you jump into owning your own travel business, don't do it because you think you're going to travel more, probably.
Yeah, and I
Not
think
that,
that's true. I think in the UK we've got, I don't know about it, what it's like in America, but in the UK we've got a lot of regulation around travel, which is as it should be because people's money needs to be protected. But that is it's not onerous, but it is really important, and it's not the sexy side of travel, but it is running the business. This is an important part, and that I actually enjoy because it's a new challenge for me, and I'm learning how to do that. I'm, you know, working it all out. But if you're not wanting to do that side of it, do think again, because there is a business side of this as well as the side of it.
absolutely. Listen, I think we could just keep going on and on and on because there's so many fascinating. I still have so many questions left for you, but we're gonna have to have you come back for that. I want to be respectful of your time and our listeners. We've chatted for a while.
We have chatted for a while. Sorry.
Before I hit the record button, I said, "Oh, we'll probably chat 45 minutes to an hour."
Mm,
I did go a couple hours once, but that guy was real talkative, and now I'm looking at the time and thinking, "Oh, I hope you don't think
sorry.
there's no judgment. No, it's me. I just want to keep asking questions. I seriously want to know more. And I'm curious though, what did I forget to ask, or what do you wish I would have asked that you'd like to share with our listeners before we do?
You know what? I don't think there is anything. I would say that thank you for this opportunity, but also I just really enjoyed chatting about it and actually me back all the way to Rome because somehow I don't think that was part of this chapter, if you like. That's a different chapter of my life, but it's always been there, right? Um, you bringing that out is quite interesting. So thank you for that. But no, I think just, look, we work in a really fun, lovely industry, and I'm passionate about the areas that we go to because of the enjoyment you get when you get there. But I also think so going back to what you were saying about the leads and keeping that respect with people and your staff, but they're also family because you're in a lodge. I think that they never resented having you there. When I look at it, the average job in Africa, across East and Southern Africa at least, in tourism, supports at least 15 people back in the village. And where we were in Zambia, that was probably a figure of more like 25 people back in the village. So it's such an important aspect for them. and they welcome you in. But you're making a difference just by going. And that also, I think, probably feels into why I love it and why when you get there, you get a different feel to just sitting on a beach in Europe, which is lovely and I've done and I'll probably do again. But, there's a difference to it.
I'm so happy. Thank you. Thank you for all of your words. And I'm so happy that we had this conversation because, as the name of the show, Big World Made Small, my first trip to Africa was a game changer for me. It was like, the deep, dark Africa, for a lot of people from the United States, that's a big deal. It's probably a big deal for people in Europe as well. But maybe I'd argue that you guys are a little closer than we are in the U.S.
Yeah, we are.
And in the U.S., we're further from a lot of things. Number one, it's not like we're Australia, but also just we have a lot of preconceived ideas about the world. I'm just saying I know it's a generalization, not everybody, but I grew up in that culture. We've got preconceived ideas about what people are like in other parts of the world because, and Africa is a huge continent. You hear of a conflict, and I'm not downplaying any conflicts, but you hear of a conflict in Africa. That means Africa is dangerous. Africa is unsettled. And why on earth would anybody want to go there?
I'm so pleased you mentioned that. I'm so pleased you mentioned that. Have you seen the map? There is a map that has the continent of Africa, just the outline, and then it has the entire rest of the world, but it has a large part of the rest of the world fitted into it.
I have seen that, where they take the landmass and put it all together and show that it's its own little world.
That's a really visual impact about the size of Africa, and you can be sitting in Botswana, Zambia, my happy place, despite the sausage route, and you're worlds away from what that reporter is talking about in Nigeria, Burundi, wherever.
And I think we can say that, and I think you and I are, I don't know, I'm going to say drinking the Kool-Aid. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And for somebody that hasn't traveled much, I mean, for somebody in the U.S. listening, that they're probably not listening to this show if they haven't traveled much. I'm probably just wasting everybody's time bringing this up. But the point is, if you're thinking about going to Yellowstone Park in Wyoming, and then you hear about, riots in Los Angeles, you're not going to change your trip. You're going to go to Wyoming, and that's like.
But that's because you know it. And it's your country.
Because it feels safe. But if you're thinking about going to Zambia and you hear about Arab Spring happening in Egypt, and that's Africa, so probably better not go right now. I get it. I'm in Mexico City right now. I don't know when this episode will be aired, but there was recently a situation with a cartel leader who was, I don't know how to say this. They got him. And
I was going to say, he is no longer.
He's unalived him, I think is what you can say on YouTube now. Anyway, and I'm not making any joke of it because there were other people involved, and it was, overall, a lot of bad things. But I'm in Mexico City, and then Puerto Vallarta was having some issues. And, even my son, who's traveled to Asia with me and to Colombia with me, is, "Oh, Dad, I think you should get out of Mexico." And when you and I, before I hit the record button, we were discussing that. And the reality is life is going on completely as normal here in Mexico City. And so anybody that's listening to this that probably doesn't need to hear me say it, but I would encourage you to go travel. Go, test your stories, test those stories in your head. Yeah.
Test the stories in your head. And if you're at all unsure, even if you're not unsure, I'm going to say use a tour operator. And the reason I say that, particularly for someone like Africa, is because it's no more expensive. But as we said at the beginning, it's expensive to get rolled. So, but then you've got the reassurance as well, and you're slightly more handheld. And so if it is your first trip and you're still worried if it's your 100th trip and you're not worried, I still will obviously say use a tour operator. But I do think that having that or, even if you think I want to go to Africa and using your example, Botswana versus Egypt, speak to somebody who knows, we want to go, but is it too close? Is it going to affect it? And they will soon be able to tell you why it won't and be able to sort of explain it in simpler terms.
Yeah. And even if you set the safety side apart as someone who went to Africa for a first time, I went back a second time as well, but there's a lot you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And I'm not talking about security issues.
Yeah.
You could probably get on a plane and fly to, is it Lusaka in Zambia, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. You could probably fly there. There's a couple lodges. You could probably walk down the street and see if they have space. You could probably do it, but you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to miss out on some really cool stuff. So if you're going to spend a plane ticket to go all, that's the whole point, is you're not even going to know it was there. If you just, I mean, yeah, there's Google, there's ChatGPT, but
there is.
ChatGPT tells me everything is wonderful. So especially me, it's my best friend. All right, Lucinda, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your stories with us and spending your time with us. And I look forward to having another conversation again soon. Thank you so much. I look
forward to it. Thank you very much, Jason. Bye-bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.